Okay, so what I thought we would do today would be we're going to talk a little bit about microphones and miking things up. And we're also going to talk about how to blend in live and virtual sounds. So the way that, but before I do that, does anybody have any questions, any burning questions that you would like to ask? Stuff that's, I know I got a bunch of emails yesterday and today that I will respond to, but anybody have any general, yes, no, no?
Yeah, I just have a question because we were talking a little bit about sidechain compression last time.
Yes.
It's a very specific question, but I just recently downloaded the LFO tools plugin, and I was just wondering if when it comes to rhythms, there are basically what would be the difference between messing with that plugin when it comes to the rhythm, right, of the specific MIDI file than the side chain compression. Is there any difference?
Well, with the side chain compression, you can take another track in your piece and use that to control another instrument, the rhythm of that. So in other words, if you've got a drum track in your piece, right, that might not be in your other tools, in those tools you've got, that specific groove. So if you look inside of Pro Tools or Logic or Cubase, you'll see that they've got these things called groove templates. And those are quantizing tools that more closely replicate a human feel, let's say. And you can create your own groove templates using Beat Detective, which I teach in my classes. And so if you've got a track where you've got a really good drum part, you can create a groove template from that drum part that your friend might be playing and use that to quantize your MIDI tracks, or use that to trigger the sidechain so that it's locked in with that instrument, right? Omnisphere has a bunch of LFO rhythmic tools built into it, and that's great. So and that's definitely useful. It's useful. All these tools and all these techniques, they're all useful. And the trick of it is to have enough experience to know which tool is the right one to use at the particular moment that you want to use it. You know? So, okay. So we've lost 12 people tonight. Oh, bummer. All right. So let me, any other questions? All right. So let's share a screen. And let me get the chat. Put that on my second screen. All right. So this is a piece of mine that I released in 2015 called First Light. It's kind of like an ambient orchestral piece, sort of, a little bit. Anyway, it gets a lot of airplay on Sirius XM, and I've sold maybe about 2,000 singles of this song over the past 5 years, which kind of music is pretty good. Let me just play this for you a little bit. I won't play the whole piece. I'll just play a couple of minutes of it. Yes, echo, lots of echo. Before I get that, I should actually go over some of that because we did go over this a little bit last week. No. Right. So I've got this at the beginning here. Let's make these tracks a little bit bigger. Well, that's a little too big. All right. So right, so I've got this bellish kind of celeste sound. You can hear that okay, everybody? Now, I recorded the effects on this. So that's the reverb. And that's the delay. And then when you add all three of them together, so you get a really nice effect there. And then okay, so these are just some guitar harmonics. Right? And then with some reverb. And then the real juice is to add this tap delay. Right, so you're basically getting, it's like a canon where the part is playing and then a beat later it's, you know, or an eighth note or whatever it is, it's playing again, same part. And it adds to the part that you're playing, you know, a lot of interest. So it's not just something that I taught you as an abstract concept last week. It's actually something that I use. So let's go down to, so on this track, there's a live oboist played by a young lady named Julia DeRosa. She lives in the city. And then there's flute played by a close friend of mine named Kathleen Nestor. She plays in the New Jersey Symphony. She's played Broadway shows. She's tremendous talent, plays ethnic flutes. And then, so I recorded both of those in my apartment. I recorded all of the orchestral instruments that are added to this track in my apartment on West 93rd Street. I was in the living room and I set up my bedroom. I've had some acoustic treatment in there, some carpets, the bed, made it fairly dead and quiet in there. And I set up a pair of stereo mics for the string players, and then for the woodwind players, I believe I used a tube microphone, a large diaphragm microphone from SE Electronics. And on the strings, I used KM184s, a pair of them, just overhead, equally spaced. So I'll get to that in a minute. And then I've got this synthesized vocal track here, played off from Omnisphere. And then my friend Joy Askew, she lives in Bed-Stuy. She's in the 80s and 90s. She toured with Joe Jackson and Peter Gabriel. She's a tremendous songwriter, singer. She plays keyboards great. So I sent her a rough mix, and she recorded her vocal tracks at her apartment on, I think she was using, she has a Neumann U67 that she runs through a universal audio. I forget what the model is, but it's got compression and a tube mic preamp in it. Let me lose some of the effects on her. So what she did was, she did the soprano line twice. Then she did the alto line twice. And then I did some work on these in terms of the durations. I tightened them up a little bit. It sounds a little unnatural now, but with the reverb and the delay and in the mix, it sounds fine. And the tenor line. So she's basically singing 4-part harmony. And then what I did with the vocal there is I have it going through this, it's a chorusing effect that's tempo synced. I don't know if you can hear it over the internet, but it adds just a little sheen and thickening to it. And then it's going through a hall reverb. And then that also is going through the tap. And then that blends in really nicely with the voice, the sampled voice. Right, that's the sampled voice. So let's play this whole passage. So that's just the sampled voice. And now with her voice. Right, and so if you look here, this is the master, the submaster for the, or the bus for the, all of her voice. And I've done some dynamic work. I've made the entrance fade in a little bit more. I don't remember there being that many delay echo repeats on the echo. All right. So for me, what I wanted to do with the sampled choir is there's a certain kind of darker quality to it than her voice is a little brighter. So I wanted that darker quality in there to just make it a little fuller sounding. And I think the blend of the two of them together is really nice. And it works really well with the echo. this is not an engineering technical thing, but one of the things that I do when I compose and write music is I always try to make it so that if you play each section, each section of the band or whatever your ensemble is, that sounds good. And if you play different sections together or parts of different sections together, they all sound good. So what I'm doing here is I'm playing the oboe and the voices, and it sounds good together. Right? The chords that I'm playing, they fit in with the melody, and the melody fits in with the chords. The mix fits in together between the two of them really well. And that's something that when you're working, you should always be paying attention to, that all the internal aspects of your music work together. They fit together like your hand in a glove. Yes, Julia's very nice. She came in and that's the first time I met her, Mark, was on this, I had her over my apartment. So, yeah, she did a great job with this. Okay. For example, if I take a look at the harmonics and the 12 string, you can hear how they fit together. Let me take off all the delays. Right? Right. So those rhythms kind of interlock together with each other. Each player, well, I did the playing, but they each and how that fits in with this. Right. And that part there, the harmonics are playing, and the 12 string is playing. And they create a composite sound together. Okay. And if I put those in, and I took off all the effects on that. That sounds good. If I add the vocals to that, that will sound good together. Oh, that's. Let me add the effects back in on the guitars. All right. Let's get to our strings. So let's do this. These are my sampled strings. Okay. Now you notice with this, there's no echo on these, just some hall reverb. And there's a lot of low strings in that. There's cello, there's bass, and then there's violins and violas. And my strings section is 4 people. Ralph Farris, who plays in the string quartet Ethel. He played violin and viola. Juna Chung, he also plays at the Lion King. He played viola and violin. And his wife, Raga Petersdotter, she played violin and viola. And the way we did this was that there's 5 parts, I believe. So this is just the first violin. And then they overdubbed the second violin. Then the third violin. Simple. It's not a very difficult part. Let's see what we're doing over here. And then let's go over here. We'll add the first viola part. And then the second viola part, or the 5th part to this harmony. Again, as far as the writing thing goes, right? If I were to just play the 2 viola parts, the writing sounds good. If I were to play the 3rd violin and the viola. Or if I play the 2nd violin and the 2nd viola. Right? Or if I played the 2 viola and the 2nd violin. So this is the thing about your writing, and is that all of your stuff, as you break it down, should all sound good. You know, all the different components, different combinations of instruments. And then there's cello right in this area here, which is played by, these are all friends of mine, people I worked with for ages. Peter Prosser. He's actually married to a Queens College graduate named Lisa Arcus. She's a flutist that I went to college with when I was an undergraduate. She's an excellent flutist, and Peter's a great cellist. And he just double tracked the same part. Right, with the violas. And then when you add all the violins, the strings together, let's take it from this middle section. And now let's hear what happens when you add the sampled strings in. We'll take just this whole section. Now, obviously, that's not technically difficult to play, but playing simple things like this emotionally and well is not easy to do. What I would also say is that I try to find like different kinds of ways to make it a little bit more meaningful, the music, like some of my inner voices. Like some of those chord voicings there, they have a couple of different notes in them. I have the notation to show you, and I certainly don't remember what it is that I wrote because I wrote this like 6 or 7 years ago, and I'll never get the chance to play it live, so I don't have any notation written except for I do have somewhere the PDFs of the music that these guys played in. Yes.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep. Go ahead, Mark.
Hello?
Yes. Oh, Alan, I'll answer your question in a second.
Sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, for some reason you're cutting out.
Huh.
Sorry. Maybe I'll try.
No. Ask your question.
I can hear you, but it's super distant.
Well, ask your question and then turn your mic off. Well, actually, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you,
Yeah. So what it is, I think, is that when your microphone is on, it's hard to hear me. So ask your question and then mute your microphone. Because you have a lot of noise in your feed there.
Weird. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Well, type your question in, Mark, and I'll ask it. So Al. So what I started off with on this piece was that I wanted to write something that had a very simple piano melody and had and those chimey things at the beginning. And that's what I started with, right? So if you listen to the piano melody at the beginning of the piece, and Mark, type your question in and I'll answer it for you. So if we listen to just this here. Oh, sorry. It would be great if I soloed the piano too. I sort of thought that's what I started with, and then I wanted something where there was a lot of dynamics to the piece, and it was semi-orchestral. But I just started playing around once I got that beginning down, and I just sort of wrote, okay, so in absence of a string library, have you ever tried just having a violinist, violist, or cellos come in and record and then copy and paste their stems a whole bunch of times to create a string section? No, actually, no. That would not be good. All you would do would be make it louder. So what I did here, right, even if I wasn't using a string library, I had doublers come that could play violin and viola. Okay, and what they did, I probably wasn't really clear about that, so let me be clear about this. On this first violin track, Ralph, Juna, and Raga all played violins, and we did two passes, so it's like 6 violinists here, right? So had the 3 of them play, they got a good take, then we did another take, and then I bounced those together so that now instead of it being 3 violinists, it's 6 violinists. And also, when they did the second take, I had Raga and Juno move to different chairs. So the microphone was picking up their sounds from different angles, right? Because I recorded them in stereo. Let me just look at you. Let me stop sharing the screen for a second so I can look. Hold on. Okay, so 3 violinists playing, 2 microphones over their head. When this violinist is playing, his sound is going up and hitting those microphones in a certain way. If I do musical chairs where they switch positions, then their violins, the sound from their instruments is hitting the microphone at a different angle, and it gives the illusion that it's a different player playing, right? So if you're going to do this with a brass player, let's say, and you have a brass player coming over and they're going to overdub 3 trumpet parts, say, ask them to bring a second mouthpiece. When you're recording the second track, have them move a little bit different position from the microphone. Anything, right? But if all you do is just record somebody once and then copy and paste that a bunch of times, that's just going to sound like the same guy playing louder or the same person playing louder. You're just going to be stacking the same waveform on top of each other. So let me go back to the track. So they did that. Then they went to the second violin part here, right? And again, three string players playing 2 takes, 2 passes through. So it sounds like 6. So when these 2 guys are together, it sounds like 12. And then I think that the third violinist, I probably only did 1 pass. And then I've got them panned all a little bit differently, which on the stereo field gives you a nice spread. And then they switched over and they took out, once they finished their violins, they got their violas out. They did the same procedure, right? So at the end of the day, I had my little 3-piece section sound like it was 18 string players or 15 string players or something like that, or 18, or maybe even more than that. But that's because I had multiple players playing instead of just one person playing. Now, if you have a string quartet over and you want them to play, and you could have them overdub multiple times, but they need to do different takes, and you need to ask them to play each take just a little bit differently, because most classical musicians are so good that each take sounds almost exactly the same. They're so consistent with their playing. The really good ones are. So, you know, the first time through, you'll say to them, maybe you listen to the way they take, and then the second time you'll say, all right, just play it a little bit under that so that it's the accompanying part, you know, so they might play it with just a little bit less intensity so that the sound coming out of their instruments is a different timbre. And then you can blend those 2 takes together, and then you can do that a few times. If they're just playing the same thing over and over again, it just sounds like you're stacking on top. But if you're careful with your methodology, you can really create the illusion of having a larger section. Does that answer your question, Mark? Yay, nay? Oh, wait, let me find the chat. I don't have that window up. Hold on.
Yes, it answers it. Sorry, but something was going on with my mic.
Okie doke. All right. So let me just do one thing here. I want to view the chat so I can see if there's any other questions. Oh, okay. Funny, George. The only reason I added samples here is because I like the way it sounded, and also because I didn't want to hire a bass section, right? I mean, like, I can't get that sound in my house.
Right.
Give me 1 second. Like the sound of all these cello and basses together. I can't get that sound with just a single player overdubbing a bunch of times. Yeah, Mark, you are very loud. Thank you, Arun. Okay, give me 1 second. I can turn my volume up. Give me 1 second. Okay, is that better? Am I louder now? Check 1, 2, louder. I just added about 10 dB again. Even louder, Al? Check 1, 2, check 1, 2. Okay. Yeah, the reason I'm using a different mic today, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to be moving around when I show you about miking techniques, and I can be hands-free with this. All right, so I could tell that I'm putting out more volume now, so hopefully you're getting a louder input. Thank you. Let me know about that stuff, because I can't listen back to how I sound here otherwise, because I've got the volume turned off in my headphones. Otherwise, it'll start feeding back. If you listen to 95% of Hollywood films today, they're done like this, with samples and stuff layered on top of it. Real players on top of the samples. Everything's done to a click track. 90% of the films. All right, so let me put this away.